Welcome back, everyone, to the VS Code Insiders podcast, the behind the scenes of your favorite code editor, Visual Studio Code. I'm your host today, James Montemagno, and with me back, it's been a while, Pierce Bogan.
It has. It's going good. I'm fighting the post-conference sickness that always inevitably happens to me whenever I attend a conference.
Yes, besides the sickness, how was your GitHub Universe?
It was amazing. It was actually the first time I've ever been, which is a little surprising, but it's like I'd always heard how this was like the most developer conference of all time. And I mean, we'll keep it real. Like I've been at Microsoft a while. I've been to the Microsoft events, and sometimes they just can feel very like corporate-y. And like they lose that developer feel. And the really cool thing, it's hard to explain about like what exactly makes this the case, but like everybody there as a developer is super passionate about developers and making it awesome, building cool stuff like developer tools, all that stuff. And so I think the energy around the event was really, really cool. The excitement around VS Code and GitHub Copilot, and also all the improvements happening on github.com as well. So it's super cool. It's definitely like a must do for me. And I think I'm definitely already marking my calendar for next year because I think they announced the dates. It's going to be the same week next year in 2026. So I'll be there.
Yep, I will probably be there as well. Yes, it was my first universe as well, which was awesome. A huge, amazing, like a plethora of folks and amazing backgrounds, just diversity of people, which was really cool to see. And I was stuck in the awesome live coding booth, the Microsoft VS Code booth. But you, for your first universe, wow, on stage, Keynote. What's up, man? Oh, wow.
I'm not really like, I feel like all the other people in the keynote are like professional public speakers, and I'm just like a guy who likes talking about VS Code. So that was a little bit of a different vibe for me. Like they were having to teach me like all the like keyboard zoom things like that you probably are a pro at. Like you should probably zoom when you talk about that. I was like, oh, I always just kind of been like, this is what I do. And they're like, yeah, but you're public speaking, man. You can't do that. So there was a lot of stuff like that was kind of new for me because this was really my first time ever doing anything like a keynote. But it's cool to kind of see how the sausage is made, like in terms of like the run up, like how it actually gets planned, how you do all the scripting and demos and all that stuff. And then like finally actually like seeing all the hard work of the team like displayed at the event and trying to show that off in the best way possible. It's all super cool to see come to life.
Yeah, and it's super hard. It's like what people don't know is like you were there like a week and a half, like early, basically. Yep. Going through over and over again. You have 5 minutes on stage to kind of show a bunch of stuff off, and that's really hard, right? Like because one, when you're prompting, you're waiting for responses. Like you don't know how long it's going to take. Like it's if GPT-5 Mini or GPT-5 or some other model decides to go thinking, it's like I'm going to start thinking right now. It's like, oh god, I'll slow it down. You know what I mean? Like that is a while. So actually, like these keynotes, these demos, these sessions that we do become harder and harder, you know what I mean? And to see things live and do things live, but you did run some prompts and do some stuff. But today what I want to do is you had 5 minutes on stage. We got time. Well, not all the time, but we got time. I want to
sometime.
I want to unravel the keynote, like the behind the scenes, behind the keynote, because you talk through a lot of stuff. We've had videos and stuff. We have a great blogs and stuff like that I'll link to in the show notes. But like I actually want to go like deeper on stuff. And actually the first place that I want to start is Kyle was on stage and he said, VS Code is our AI native editor. What does that actually mean?
So if you think about VS Code, it literally started as just the Monaco editor, right? And over time evolved to get kind of the extension host and extensions and more language support. And then we added remote support. And so like VS Code is kind of always just like the developer space constantly evolving to meet the needs of like what the community needs from us. And I think it's very clear, like over the past couple of years, that AI is the next evolution. Like we really deeply believe that it's going to change how we work as developers and empower us to do even more and embrace this abundance mindset around building things in code. And so like, I think when we talk about the AI editor, what we're really saying is like, no, like we're deeply thinking about for any new feature we're building, like, how does this actually fit in with all the AI stuff? So I'll give an example. Like, okay, now I'm using the agent much more, right? So what are the consequences of that, right? So like I am going to have way more PRs, which means I'm going to have way more merge conflicts. Okay. So like, what are we doing about that? I'm also going to do way more code review. Okay, how do we make that better? And so you start to think about, and we'll talk about how some of that mindset also bleeds into the announcements at the keynote, but really like it's a mental state that you have to live in as the team and the product to really think about like, okay, what do we need to do if we are evolving into this AI editor. And then there's like the product truth behind that, right? Like over the last year, we've added agent mode, next edit suggestions, background agents, bring your own key, model choice, so many different features. And they're like really integrated deeply into the editor, like not just the chat pane, but like if you go to terminal, there's AI. If you go to the editor, there's AI. If you go to the source control view, there's AI to help you generate your commit message. And then also kind of also true to our story, open source, right? So making sure that all of the AI functionality that we build inside the product is actually all available for the community to kind of view and build on with us. So that's always been a big part of our story. GitHub Copilot wasn't always open source in VS Code, and this year we've worked to make that true as well.
Yeah, and I think you just announced like a pretty, like I just saw on Twitter X thingy that something else just happened in that space as well. It has nothing to do with the keynote, but what actually just happened in that space for the open source part?
Yeah, so back in June, we open sourced the GitHub Copilot chat extension, which powered pretty much all of the AI capabilities inside of VS Code outside of kind of where it all started with the ghost text completions where you hit tab and it completes your thought, which it's crazy. That was like only a couple years ago because it feels like so long ago, but that's like the OG Copilot, right? Where it all began. And so that was actually a separate extension. So if you install GitHub Copilot, you'll notice you have two extensions inside of VS Code, GitHub Copilot chat. So now we're kind of taking all the functionality from the GitHub Copilot extension, bringing that into GitHub Copilot chat. So it's one extension and it's open source, but there's some other benefits, right? Like because there was two extensions, sometimes completions and next edit suggestions, which kind of also are AI powered suggestions in the editor, but they're kind of predicting your next thought more so than finishing your current one. They would kind of fight. And you'd have situations where, okay, we're doing two requests, right? We're doing a completions request and an NES request. What wins, right? You have kind of all those things. And so it's also a step for us as we can move towards kind of one model powering these things behind the scenes, one prompt. And hopefully that means faster and higher quality suggestions for you inside the editor.
Very cool. And I like how you kind of talked about how the AI is kind of blending in, but more naturally, right? Like you said, like, hey, they box to enter the commit message, but also like you could just like have it autocomplete. Right? You're in the terminal, like you're doing natural stuff. There's a bunch of completions, a bunch of auto stuff. There's a lot of things happening, but also maybe you don't know how to run a command. Just ask the command. Like it's very natural. It's not like directly in, like it's not taking over your editor, right? It's like it's here naturally for you, and ideally is evolving as the space evolves too. Like I think we'll talk about some of the things that is really nice, but where I'm coding nowadays isn't necessarily 100% in VS Code, right? Like I literally, before this podcast, I went onto GitHub. I saw there was an issue. I on my MCP badge creator website from Frank, and I assigned it to Copilot as some extra context. I watched in Mission Control, and then I like open it in VS Code. I'm doing testing and I'm iterating with it as well. So it's like where I'm working is now in more places than ever. And I think you're kind of showing that in your demo. So I want to kind of set the stage. When you were thinking about what you wanted to show, right? Obviously, there's the bajillion things that the team actually like shipped in insiders and like even since Universe, there's been a whole bunch of new stuff too. Which, like, I open it up and like I click a button, like that's new, whoa, and I'm like I tweeted like that's amazing. And Oren's always spoiling everything like on
shout out to Oren.
x.com/OrenMe I think is like is awesome if you want. I think he just like watches the commits in the open. To your point. Everything the team's putting in is in there. So stuff that was in the keynote was already in the product. It's just some stuff you needed to figure out. So when you're thinking about what you wanted to show in the story, how did you decide what story you wanted to tell? What was important about how like VS Code has been evolving and what just dropped? Like, how did you come up with a story plan that fit into the bigger narration?
Yeah, so I think like you know, unfortunately, I'm extremely online. The team is extremely online, right? Like we see all the problems that come in, whether it's social media issues, one-on-one conversations we have with developers or their teams. Like you start to see as more and more people are adopting AI and in particularly agentic workflows, like the types of kind of things that start cropping up more is like, okay, now we have this. Now this is my new set of things to the point about evolution that I kind of have to struggle with as a developer. And so there was a couple themes that really were coming up more and more. So like there was this theme of like, how do I actually get good results from the agent? Right? Like a lot of people will spend time iterating with the agent and you're just like so frustrated because you can't get what you want. And so that's like a common theme of like, well, how am I actually supposed to partner with this thing? How do I impart my special knowledge as a developer on the solution that the agent's building? So that's like a super common theme we hear a lot about. Customization. like the built-in VS Code agent is amazing, but like it's certainly true that every team is different in how they work and their process and like what they like to see. And so we've always done a lot of customization work inside of VS Code, but in particular around agents, it's becoming more of a theme for us. And then also kind of this theme of partnering with more agents and in different ways. To your point, like you're not always necessarily kicking off your coding task in VS Code, right? Maybe you're on github.com, you notice something, you kick off a Copilot task, then you're coming into VS Code and you're more in review mode, right? Review and run mode. Like I'm going to give feedback. I'm going to do the last mile work that this thing that I kicked off somewhere else is going. And so we kind of started with like, what are the big problems that we think developers have? And then of course, like match that to the story of how we think we're evolving VS Code to meet those things. And it is really hard because there's, like you said, you have 5 minutes, right? Every word is really heavily scrutinized. And I really want to show all the things that are happening with the team. To your point, there's so much happening every single month in VS Code. It's hard to show it all, especially in 5 minutes. But like in terms of prioritizing the items we showed, those were the main areas we want to focus on. Like, what are the big problems that we're hearing from developers that they have right now? And then like, how do we see like VS Code evolving to actually help developers with those problems?
And I think Kyle said it pretty good when he was talking about the AI native editor, how close the GitHub and the Copilot and the VS Code team are working. Because to your point, if I'm working with the agents be everywhere now, by the way, everything's an agent, right? If I'm working and I'm working on github.com and I'm assigning stuff and I'm pulling it down, like I need it to work the same, right? If I have an agent, like I have a C# agent or a WinForms agent or a Vite agent, right? That's like really specialized, or a CSS agent. It's like I'm doing a super specialized CSS task. I need to be able to go from online where background agents and things are running into my CLI or into my code editor. I need it to work like 100% the same, right? And also, I don't want to change context either.
Yep.
So I think to what you're saying is, how are his developers working? Well, they're working in many places, but actually VS Code can also be the hub for those things as well. And that's what I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into as we kind of go through your keynote. So you and the team and everyone were building this Octo Canvas thing. You plug in your username, you get a bunch of stats. I love stats. You get badges, you get trading cards, you get all these things. I love a big stats guy over here.
Classic engineer.
Love a good stat. Love to fill the grid if you possibly can. So you started off and you said, I want to add some new features. So talk about 3 weeks ago, how you used to plan features and now how you plan features now. And also like how this new feature of this plan agent actually works, because it's the very first thing you talked about, but you kind of had to go through it, right? Because planning takes time.
Yeah. So I think this idea of planning is not necessarily new. We have a lot of art already out in the community. Like our team has already been shipping something called Spec Kit, which is like a really opinionated version of this workflow that has a lot more features. But we also have kind of been thinking about planning at different altitudes, right? Like Spec Kit is really like, I'm planning my project and everything in it, all the features, and like cascading all the way down to like, how do I actually build this thing? Then you have kind of where plan mode sits, which is like, I already have like a somewhat like specified thing that I want to go do. I want to add this feature to VS Code or something like that. I'm not like, I don't know what I want to build. Like I already have an idea, right? But maybe I need help with the implementation details. And then it's not really, it's kind of planning. Like we have to-dos that we announced a couple releases ago. And that's kind of within the actual conversation turn you have in chat of like, that is a plan for based off what you prompted the agent to do in that turn. And so I think the thing we were missing was kind of what's the thing in between that super high level, we're planning the whole, product thing, and the like within the turn thing. And so this was where plan mode came in. I think Harold and I did a build talk, which was like structured vibe coding. I don't remember the name of it or something like that, where we kind of like started talking about early explorations of this flow. And so ultimately, like this kind of started as a custom mode that we had in the VS Code repo for planning, which our team uses to actually implement new features inside of Copilot. And then kind of by using that, you start to see other things you want, right? One of which was like planning is very tricky because there's a lot of context heavy operations, right? Like pretty much every planning session starts with research, right? The user wants to implement X feature. Well, obviously I need to understand how the code works, right? And so you start by kind of gathering all of the context. That is very context heavy. And the reason that matters is like typically the way this would work previously is if I wanted it to go find a bunch of files, it would find those files, and then that would just be attached, like the whole file would be attached in your context. And then suddenly your context window it's separate from the context window itself. It has a lot of things in there, and not all of it is actually relevant for what the user said, right? Only a subset is.
Yeah.
And so we introduced this kind of idea of subagents, which is like agent mode can basically go create another agent to do a super specialized thing. It's very context heavy. And then that subagent returns back to the main thread kind of the most important things. And so this enables us to keep all the context heavy operations somewhere else, return only the most important information back to the main thread, which does two things. It keeps your response quality super high as you only have the most important context in there. And also it keeps you from filling your context window prematurely. So both of these things are good things. So that's also kind of part of plan mode and something as we explored planning more that we ran into. The other is like, the first version of the plan often is like, okay, but like there's other things that you really need to consider. And so we really wanted to like explore this idea of like, okay, follow-up questions, basically like, okay, the user tells me they want this, but have they thought about after I looked at the code, these are the things you actually need to consider, right? And then it's obvious, okay, I have my plan, now what? And so this was kind of this idea of handoffs of like, okay, maybe I want to pop this plan into the editor for further iteration, like as a markdown file. We'll do some other things in the future where like you can like basically interact with that more as an actual artifact inside of vscode that's not just a markdown file. So this is just kind of the first rev of this. But the other benefit of that is you can check the plan into source control, right? So that's kind of good if you really like your planning artifacts to be like under source control. Or you can just pass to agent to start implementing. So like we also wanted like, if we're going to have this notion of modes, like the obvious thing that always happens is you're like, well, now I have to change the mode. And that's kind of annoying. And so we introduced this notion of handoffs inside of plan to kind of help me through that. So in the keynote, we planned this sharing feature so that those wallpapers you mentioned, we could actually basically share to social. And so it was kind of complex actually, because there's really not actually a good way to share images actually to Twitter. And so kind of as part of the planning process with the agent, one thing that came up is like, okay, well, we can actually use the Twitter intent kind of URL to open this up with some pre-canned text, but I actually can't attach an image. So then we had to kind of go through the plan, and it was like, okay, now we need to actually convert the image to base 64. We need to copy that to the user's clipboard. That needs to actually be posted. And so that was all things planned, the mode that helped me to figure out in the keynote.
Yeah, we did a whole podcast with Bhavya last week, so definitely go listen to that one as well to even deeper dive on the planning agent. But I think what's really fascinating about it is like you said, I sort of was doing this a little bit previously, where I would go just like open up Copilot, like maybe like an ask mode, or I just go to like github.com/Copilot and like open my repo and say, hey, I want to do this thing, like help me draft an issue. Like that's what that was my flow, like help me draft an issue, an artifact, right? That was there. But now what I've noticed is that you said that it's grabbing this context and then being smart and asking me follow-up questions, which I really appreciate because it's like pretty smart. Some of the models will keep asking you questions forever, basically, until it's like, but it's also helpful because you don't have to answer all the questions, or you can just like decide that this is good enough. We'll figure it out later. But I want to talk about the sub agents that you're talking about, because what I've noticed is when I prompt it, all of a sudden I see like new indentation of things, like starting research. I'll see like instead of waiting, right? Or thinking, it's doing so. And then I see like a what's happening there?
So what's happening? By the way, that's how you know that Flow is using a subagent right now in chat. If you see like a task and then you see like indentation, like a sub bullet basically of things happening, like read this file or did this thing, that's essentially using subagents. We might play with the UX a little bit to make it more obvious, but that's kind of how it works today. But basically what's happening is the main thread has been instructed to use a subagent for certain tasks. And so a subagent is just a tool, just like reading a file is a tool and other things. And so basically it will run the run subagent tool. It will say, your job is to, in the case of plan mode, to do this research. You need to do these things. So the main agent will kind of draft dynamically a prompt for the subagent, send it off. then basically everything that happens from then on out is in the subagent layer. So like in plain mode, that's mostly searching and reading files. And so all that's happening in that subagent. And then when the subagent is satisfied, then it basically takes all that and it says, okay, this was actually the goal of like this whole thing that the user originally started this with, rather than just returning all the files that we came back with in this code base search, like what's actually the important context, return that back to the main thread. So in some ways it's like a function, right? Like you're like function subagent, this is what the user's goal is. And then as a return thing, pass back all the important information. And that's essentially what's happening there. You will get like a lot of reads coming in, and that's because we've recently done work to do parallel tool calling, which is pretty cool for the models that support it. So like what we used to be like, read this file, read this file, read this file. Now it's like if the model found like 5 results simultaneously in its search, like whether that was a semantic search or a regex search or a keyword-based search, like it might say like, oh, these are the 5 files I need to look at. It will actually simultaneously in one tool call go and read all those files, and then you'll just boom, see them all stream into chat. So also, that makes searching faster. That's not really necessarily something restricted to subagents, but it is very helpful for the subagents flow as well.
That's cool. Yeah. And I noticed that, when we talk about this, there's this newer concept, right? Where we had agent mode. Now kind of these modes are transforming into like the agents themselves, right? Agents calling agents, and like planning is kind of a mode, but it's also like an agent because it's thinking and operating in a different way. So kind of, we did a podcast with Burke a while ago about beast mode, but now it's really the beast agent. So everything's an agent, but these agents work across multiple places. So you transition into like, hey, we've planned this thing out. Now I actually want to implement the thing. And then you actually use a different agent. Like you could have just, like you said, through handoff gone and said, let's start implementing this. Here's an artifact. But use a different agent. Let's talk about custom agents, because that was the bigger thing. I don't know if people grokked it as much. It took me a little bit to actually going to Awesome Copilot, the GitHub repo, which I'll put in the show notes, and looking at the different agents that were available and understanding what they wanted. So can you explain this TDD agent, test-driven development agent? You're madman over there doing tests. Although I literally just asked like for V-tests to go create a bunch of tests for my MCP thing. So I should have this agent, I think is what I'm thinking. But how should developers think about this agent? How did you think about it in your flow? And how's it changing how you develop? And like, how is it different than this kind of custom modes that we used to have before?
Yeah. So just at a high level, like what is an agent, right? It's a good question. Like, yeah. And it basically like there's differing definitions out there, but I think everyone's largely aligned. Like it is a prompt, it has a set of tools, and it has a model. And like if you think about the difference between what is the difference between the agent in VS Code and the agent in the Copilot CLI? Well, it has different prompts. It has a different set of tools. Like VS Code is optimized to use the full tool set of VS Code and the full context of the editor. Obviously, you don't have that in the terminal, so it uses more terminal-based tools. So the tools are restricted, which is good and bad. And they have different models that they use. Now, in the case of Copilot, largely we try to make sure all the models are available everywhere, but you might have like different defaults and things like that, depending on the modality you're working in. So then, like, if you extend that definition and you're like, okay, well, like, I want to do something like test-driven development. Which, by the way, like I have always hated this. Like the test-driven development zealots out there, like I was just like, all right, I get it. Like, but it is actually very important with AI, because if you actually are doing a significant volume of AI generated contributions, it's going to get very unwieldy for you to manually make sure that nothing is regressed in code review. And so it's kind of funny because some of the basic software engineering practices actually I feel like are more important and more noticeable with AI, because they're like your checks and balances, right? If you're moving at a faster pace. And so tests are actually quite important. And so I was like, okay, I want to do test-driven development. Now I could have just prompted agent mode. I want you to do test-driven development. I want you to do these things. Well, in practice, the more you run through this flow, you'll realize, man, there's a lot of edge cases, right? I don't want you to, like, sometimes the agent would like try and implement the feature and then write the test, or it would write the test and then it would implement the feature, and then it would try to just fit the test to actually pass, even though it's not actually doing what I asked. And like
it's as if it's non-deterministic.
Yes, exactly. And so you realize actually this prompt, if I'm really like leaning on this as my workflow, I have to get super specific. So the prompt really becomes super unwieldy if you wanted to do this every single time, right? then also the tools, right? So in test-driven development agent, like I have many built-in tools from VS Code. I have MCPs and extensions I've installed that give me more tools. Actually, you can get much better results with AI when you constrain the tool set that's available. You can do this manually in agent mode with the tool picker. But again, if I'm doing this repeatedly on my team, this is very difficult to go in and constantly toggle all the tools I want. And so in the case of TDD, it was like, okay, what do I need? I need to check for problems from the language service. I need to check the test runner. I need to be able to use the playwright MCP. I need to be able to read files. I need to be able to edit files. That's probably it. Like I don't need the Jupyter tools. I don't need all these other things. And so the constraint is actually quite good for the agent's performance in terms of quality. And so that's like another big component. And then like I played with a lot of different models, and it's like, I think certain models are better at this test-driven development flow. And so then it's, for me, that was Sonnet 4.5. So I was like, all right, we'll use Sonnet 4.5. And so that is kind of the definition of this test-driven development agent. But the cool thing is it's like a file, right? And so I can check it into my check it into my repo, and it just lives alongside my code. So every developer on my team has access to the same agent. This is another big reason you would create a custom agent. Sure, maybe Pierce can prompt this thing. Maybe I could change the tools. Maybe I could change the model every time. But like, if I'm running a real engineering organization, that's not a scalable technique of like, please do all these things. Like, that's not how we do software engineering. We like repeatability, right? And so that's why we kind of really like this idea of defining your agent in a file, and that lives in your repository. And to your point earlier, we're trying to make sure that for a lot of these customization features that we build, they work everywhere. So if you build a custom agent in VS Code, that custom agent should work if you're using custom agents on github.com. And so that was another big kind of part of this flow, is like, no, we actually really believe in custom agents, and we think no matter where you are, we're GitHub and we're VS Code and Microsoft, like it should work no matter what surface you're in, right? So that was another big motivation for us in this custom agents workflow.
Yeah, that's super nice, especially when you're working with a custom agent, like in locally, or then following up later, like sending off to a background cloud agent to be like, say, no, use the same exact agent, or like keep it going there. I wrote a blog post. I'll put a link to it, but I have this app that I vibe coded, which is like a type back app, because I do a lot of demos and I write a lot of typos. Now I know the AI doesn't care, but it's not super professional when I typo every other word because I'm trying to type fast. So I wrote an app that basically just types back a thing that I give it. It could be a file. It could be just like text. I use a Control-Shift-1 and just like boom goes. But it's a WinForms app, so I do a lot of my demos on Windows, and there's a custom WinForms agent, which is kind of bananas, but also like it is huge, and like the actual engineering team, the .NET engineering team, put it together to help build better WinForms apps. Like it is aware of DPI, it's aware of light theme, dark theme, it's aware of all these best practices and layouts, and the designer, which inherently, like, you know, it's making it aware of how designer files work behind the scenes. So it's actually this huge custom agent. Like I get like way better results, but now I can go between all the things and work everywhere, which is cool. And like you said, you can also use MCP servers as tools, right? It's not just like the built-in tools, anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of those things. Like if you're listening to this Insiders podcast, you're obviously like really into this space, right? And I think if you're not just a solo founder or developer working on your own thing, you're working with other people, and it's likely that you all have differing levels of experience with AI. And so like I definitely don't want to undersell the point of like, it is very important that this is a way that you as a person on your team who's really into AI and understands how all this work can really make sure that your entire team is really doing really well with this thing. Because otherwise, like if you wanted to go and teach everyone how to prompt and do all TDD and all this the right way, that would be a lot of work. And you should probably do that. But like a good way to kind of enforce best practices on your team is stuff like this. It's like the new, like, you know how like, wait, I still do this. Like you design like CI pipelines and stuff to check for all the things you want. It's like another way that you can make sure that your engineering organization is doing the things you want. So I definitely encourage everyone who's listening to this, like on your team, to think about like how you work and like, is it something that could be represented by a custom agent?
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. And I think the other thing that I've been doing too is, as you're working, like, and things are doing good, you can always like have the AI like help you build the custom agent for you, or the prompt for you, or the instructions for you. Like I do that a lot.
Fun
like,
fact, that happened with the TDD agent.
No,
so the
nice.
initial scaffolding for the TDD agent, I actually prompted. I said, I want to build this TDD agent. Here's kind of how generally I want it to work. So it scaffolds out something. And it actually did really good. Like it gave a prompt and it gave examples, which I wouldn't have done. It's like, here's an example of what the user wants, and here's an example of what I want you to do if the user asks this. And that does really well when the AI starts to give examples like few shot prompting. And so, like, yeah, using AI to write the custom agent is actually a really good pro tip.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we talked a little bit about how these new custom agents are kind of working everywhere. We've talked a bit about how, you know, these new modes are really helping out. And we have MCP everywhere as well, not only in the editor, but also in the CLI and in GitHub. And we've talked about all these things. And we had Josh and Bridget on quite a while ago, actually, when the kind of cloud agent, you know, or it was coding agent at the time. Now it's a cloud agent, which, you know, makes sense. It's in the cloud. It's happening. Was starting to be integrated into VS Code, but it feels like this moment that you talked about on stage of partnering closer with not just Copilot, but with agents in general as a high level term, right? And I think this is important verbiage and word selection, is that the team thought about how could you make that experience better. So after you've sort of started to work and do things in the IDE and in your code editors, you know, there's a bunch of sessions happening everywhere. So how is VS Code bringing it together into a unified space? And how is it actually not just Copilot either, right? Because like it's about agents, not necessarily about just Copilot.
That's right. Yeah, I think like this goes back to like the thing we were talking about earlier about like when we think about features, like we think about like if this feature is successful, what are actually the consequences of that, right? And so like admittedly you don't always, especially not in AI, you can't perfectly predict things, but we listen to the community and like we try to reason about these things. And I think one thing that I didn't really fully anticipate is like, okay, when I was using especially the local agent mode, right? I'm mostly partnering synchronously with the agent, right? And so, yes, I want kind of, and we will add support for better multi-synchronous local chats. That's a thing we'll do. But generally, actually, when I'm in VS Code, I'm in agent mode and I'm partnering with it. I'm like, my job is watching that chat and making sure it's doing what I want. And so it deserves my full attention. And so, you know, we didn't really notice this kind of pattern of like, oh, I have a lot of things I need to keep track of until you start thinking about background delegation, right?
Yeah.
And that is where all this all started. We built kind of this view to kind of, okay, we have these background tasks now. How do I actually see them all? And for me, actually, that's how I mostly work now. I start by kicking off I might even do plan local. Then I kick off a coding agent task on github.com or from VS Code. And then I actually like doing the last mile work. Like if I've done the planning, then the cloud agent actually does a pretty good job. Then I go into review mode and I'm kind of making tweaks and things like that locally. So the way I partner with Copilot has also changed inside of VS Code, at least for me. But the implication of that is now I suddenly have many more threads because like I think we're similar. We've both talked about it like a lot of how like I'll be on mobile and I'm like, I have this idea, like let me kick it off, or you know, like I'm in a meeting, let me quickly kick this off. And now we have Teams and Slack integration. Like, oh, I'm gonna kick this off. But if you were to see like the amount of PRs I'm kicking off, it's a lot, right? If I even have a half decent idea, I'm kicking it off, right? And that can become very unwieldy at scale, right? And I think originally this was like overwhelming. It's like, okay, agents were supposed to make my life better, and did they just make it more complicated for more things for me to keep track of, right? And so then it was like, okay, what do we need for that? And I think it was very obvious we needed. It's been a long time since we added a new, like, what I'll call view primitive in VS Code of like, okay, you have the Explorer, you have source control. But it's like, okay, if we're an AI editor, if people are partnering more with agents, if you're going to have more of these things, it's kind of obvious that you need a place where you can kind of kick off, monitor, and review all of your chats, no matter where they're from. So that was kind of the initial inspiration for Agent Sessions view, which is new inside of VS Code Insiders. And that's kind of like, it's got all your local chats, it's got all of your Copilot coding agent, like Cloud Copilot task. It's got all your CLI tasks too. We now have CLI integration in there if you really like the CLI agent harness. And so all those are integrated there. And then it was kind of obvious from talking to developers that like VS Code has always also been about choice, right? Like when you download VS Code, it's empty. You have to go and install themes, extensions, right? Languages. That's how VS Code works. We recently did a bring your own key API. So extensions can contribute models to Copilot. And it's like, okay, like both from a VS Code and Copilot perspective, it's kind of obvious we really want to support like all of your agents, even if they're not from us in this view, right? And so that was another big announcement, is like we announced that Codex is available inside of this view as well. There is an API, and we're kind of inviting more partners to build with us. It's not a super stable API, admittedly, because we're still figuring out, like, the space is moving so quickly, exactly what we need. But it is an API that's publicly available, and Codex has built on that for OpenAI. And so the idea is, like, no matter what agents you're partnering with, whether they're from Copilot or Microsoft or from third parties like OpenAI, like, you should be able to see all those in one view, just like you can when you install any other VS Code extension, and it can supply views to different parts of the editor. So that was like the first inspiration. The second was like, okay, like, if we're already kind of saying, like, I'm in VS Code, right, and I'm partnering with these agents, and especially like especially people more kind of power users have a lot of preferences of, like, I like to use Codex for this thing, or I like to use Claude Code for this thing, or I like to use Copilot for this thing. Like, then you kind of get to this point, you like have a ridiculous amount of subscriptions. Like, I don't know if you're like, how many subscriptions you got, James? Like, my credit card people are like, are you hacked? Like, because I'm constantly signing up and canceling different subscriptions.
You got to collect them all.
You do have to collect them all. And so then kind of the obvious thing is like, hey, we provide inference via this thing called Copilot API that's already in GitHub Copilot. We already have kind of for business and enterprise this like really nice observability layer with metrics and policies and things like that. If we're letting other agents play in this view, like, wouldn't it also be cool if like that could all be centralized under my GitHub Copilot subscription too? And that's great for developers because then I get choice, and it's great for like enterprises and people more kind of in more of a IT role to have the observability of what's happening with all these agents, no matter what you choose. And so the other really cool announcement is for Pro Plus subscribers, you can actually use your GitHub Copilot subscription with OpenAI's Codex without having to sign up for like a separate ChatGPT subscription. So that's really cool as well.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, some people were asking me like why, and I did a whole video about how I use this, different things. And kind of like you said, it's about choice. Yeah. One of the things that's really fascinating is I do like I'm not a CLI person, as many people know listen to this podcast or know me personally.
Love a button.
I love a button. Give me a big button guy. Give me buttons. I'm good to go. Toggles, drop downs. I love a UI. Big GUI guy. But Scott Hanselman, my boss, is a big CLI fan. And the one thing that's kind of bugged me about any CLI is if I want to start working, I have to like go and navigate to a folder. Like, that is just pure chaos. It's just like, I know I could right click open in terminal, but that's still too many buttons, like too many keystrokes wasted on navigating around. So one thing that's really fascinating in this agent session is the integrations of being able to open different things. And people may not know this, but one of the cool parts is even if you're just like, I love the CLI, I think VS Code is a better shell for, if you will, for the CLI, because it gives you two options. It actually gives you a GUI option, and then it gives you a raw terminal option. However, it will open the terminal to where you're at. Like, if you have a folder open, it opens there.
Yeah, I think I totally forgot the point I was going to make. You were making it really... Oh, yes. So, like, as you're talking, I'm also... Like, you're like, the VS Code is a natural place. We're talking about how we work is changing with agents. Like, I think it's very interesting that Codex and Claude Code both started as pure terminal experiences and then built VS Code extensions. And I think the reason for that is, one, like, people like the different viewports and how they partner with it. But I think also, just like with the Cloud Agent, still, like, regardless of how your code is actually getting written, I like looking at my code in VS Code, seeing the diffs. I run my code in VS Code. I debug my code in VS Code, right? And so that's also kind of an obvious thing, is like, even if my code is actually being written by the CLI, I still need to go to VS Code, right?
I need to see the code.
And so, exactly. Yep. Like, we're not at the point where as a developer, the code is like, doesn't matter. Like, I don't think we're anywhere close to that, actually. And so, like, then if I'm spending a lot more time looking at code, running code, that sort of thing, then the obvious thing I have to do is go to the editor. And then it's quite awkward if those things aren't very tightly tied together. And so I think that is why, like, Codex and Claude Code built VS Code extensions ultimately. And that is why, like, also you kind of need something like agent sessions, right, for this exact task as well. So yeah, it was kind of, I didn't really anticipate it when these terminals came out, these CLIs for different agents, but it's kind of obvious, right? Like, it's very rare that you would just be using a CLI and building an app and then like, oh, I'm never looking at the code. I'm never running this. Like that just seems unlikely to me, right? So it's kind of obvious that you would end up back in VS Code.
Yeah, it's super fun. And I do like both views. Like, and a good example of like what I mean by GUI for the terminal is that you can just do a new one and actually like gives you a chat box there and actually gives you a model drop down. So you can select things that you would normally run a command for and it'll just run the commands for you. Or you can just say, give me the terminal. Here it is. Give me big terminal. Boom. I'm good to go. Give me that. I love that. I'm good to go. But they all show up on the left-hand side. And like you said, I've been
and
using
you don't
this
have to use them all, right? Like you use the ones that work for you.
It's very true. It's like you're playing Pokemon. Listen, you're gonna collect them all, but you're only gonna put 6 in your starters, right? And you're actually only gonna use like 2 of those. Let's just be honest. We all just level up whatever's in the first slot in our Pokeballs. So anything else? I know we've been talking for a long time, but I wanted to take this 5 minutes and extrapolate it out as much as I possibly could, just mostly because I like hanging out with you. But anything else that people like really need to take away from not just this release, but from GitHub Universe and the direction that VS Code is going here?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, you can see like we're investing a lot in agents and kind of the implications of agents. There's more things we're working on in terms of code review and things like that we're working on bringing into the editor. I did not talk a lot about the code AI code first workflow. We talked a lot about the prompt first workflow, but there's still like a lot of improvements happening there as well. Like I mentioned earlier, we open sourced the completions code for GitHub Copilot Chat. We've constantly been building, like, we don't really talk about it a lot. We should talk about it more, James, but like we're constantly building new custom models to power many of these features, right? And so like also that experience continues to kind of level up as we're building new models that incorporate the latest capabilities, new data, etc. That really are up leveling the completions and next edit suggestions experience. Like we're upgrading things like the code-based search like models that we have behind the scenes with Copilot embedding. So we have kind of a lot of things that, to your point earlier, like I got 5 minutes. What do I talk about? Like, but there's so many other things that I think are interesting about what's going on in VS Code. And I think the really cool thing is, like I said, like all this is actually driven by your feedback. Like we listen. If we don't, then you should let us know where we're not listening. But we do listen. I think I read every single tweet about VS Code every single day. Like the VS Code team is super responsive on GitHub issues. We read Reddit. Like we're talking to developers one-on-one. So like if there's areas you'd like to see us invest more, like please hold us accountable. Like that's the beauty of open source and kind of the way that the VS Code team works. And so we'll keep thinking about kind of, okay, what is the next implication of the work that we've done here and what do we need to go do? And but yeah, I just wanted to kind of celebrate the community because it's also been like, I was reflecting because it's kind of the end of the year and at Microsoft, it's like when we do our performance reviews and things like that. And it's kind of crazy, like just the last year of like what has happened with Copilot, and even imagining like someone tweeted like after Universe, like it's crazy to see like what happened in the last year with Copilot, and it's like I even think about that for like the next week, like what will the next week look like? Because like a year ago we barely had non-open AI models in the product. We didn't have agent mode. We didn't have next edit suggestions. Like all the things that I actually use as my daily drivers in the product didn't exist. And this is kind of insane to say, right? But like, then I also think about, well, if this is like the velocity we've had over the last year, and now like we have agents at our disposal, local and background, and we're kind of really leaning into all this. Like, where will we be in a month or two? Like, it's crazy to think about, So I'm also like incredibly proud of like all the work the team has done over the last year to kind of go on this transition of like VS Code into an AI editor. I think it's been really cool to see, and it's been great to have the community like holding us accountable and giving us feedback along the way.
And not only just giving feedback, but also like making pull requests. Like it's open source. You're the PRs. I spoiler alert. I run a weekly query to find external contributors and send out sweet VS Code swag. So like, not saying it's a guarantee, but like I think it's super rad to see stuff come in and have the conversation about it. So Pierce, thank you so much for coming on and talking through the keynote in depth as well. I really appreciate it because you see it and you watch it for 5 minutes, but actually it's about 1,000 other things and the mindset of why that happens. So I'll put links to the keynote, put links to the release notes. I'll put links to everything that we talked about. I'm going to put chapters on this one since it is our longest podcast today. So Pierce,
sorry, I like to talk.
It's all good. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And If you made it this far in the podcast, thank you so much for listening and or watching. If you are watching this on YouTube, I want to remind everyone that you can not only, of course, subscribe to the VS Code YouTube channel for awesome videos and live streams and a bunch of other stuff, but this is also an audio podcast. So if you're like, wow, this is cool, like it's really great just to see James and Pierce's face and a few demos in between, but it would just be great to like listen on my car ride. You can take it on the go anytime. It's in every single podcast application, RSS feed, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, my favorite, anything that's out there. Go to vscodepodcast.com or just literally search VS Code Podcast, VS Code Insiders inside your podcast application today. Share it with your friends, like, subscribe to all the stuff. It's going to do it for this VS Code Insiders podcast. Until next time, happy coding.